Hi, this is the third video in the playlist where we're looking at the Edexcel 2018 paper, and it's the foundation tier. In the previous video we completed to question number 18, and we're going to start with this particular video from question 19 onwards. Please do stop the video, have a go at each of the questions and then compare your solution. Okay, so on to question number 19, and we're being asked to work out basically the perimeter of this particular shape, which happens to be a farmer's field, and Jim is going to build a fence around it. We need to find out the total cost. Okay, so it's one of those questions where really you just need to be fairly methodical in the way that you work through this. So let's firstly have a look at the actual perimeter itself. So at the moment we've got this semicircle. Okay, well, to work out the circumference or the perimeter of a circle, it would be pi times d. So perimeter, okay, is going to be pi d. Okay, some people will use 2 pi r. It's exactly the same, but pi d. Now that's actually the full circle. Okay, so we've only got half a circle and we need to then divide that by 2. Okay, now one of the things here is that at the moment I'm ignoring this length along here. Okay, so with this formula, all I'm doing is looking at the circle itself. Okay, so as I work through that, it'll be a case then at the end, I'm going to add then that 50 meters to it. Okay, now at the moment, pi, I'm going to use 3.142 or use my calculator version of pi, and we're told that the diameter is 50 meters. So I can just plug the information straight into this particular formula and I'm going to get the same as saying 78.55. Okay, once you've actually calculated that out, where D is going to be 50. Okay, and you should get 78.55 or something very, very close to that. Okay, now as I mentioned before, you need to remember that we've also got this straight line that's along here as well. So we need to add 50 meters to that. Okay, and when we've done that, that will give us a total of 128.55. So here is the semicircle. Okay, and then this is the straight edge. Okay, I hope that's okay for you. I have missed a step out with the calculation itself, but I'm sure you'll be able to follow that through on your calculator. Okay, so now we know that the total perimeter is 128.55 meters, and therefore we've got to work out the cost. Okay, well, we're told that the cost is £29.86 per meter. Okay, plus £180 for each day's work, and it'll take 3 days to build. So let's look at the total cost calculations then. So the total, okay, is going to be the meterage, which is 128.55, multiplied by 29.86, which is the cost per meter, and that's going to give you 3,838.503. Okay, I know I've gone to 3 decimal places there, but it'll be okay in the end. Bearing in mind I'm using the value of pi on my calculator as well, and also this will give me a higher level of calculation. Okay, then I've got also, so this is the fence cost, then I've got labour, and we're told 3 days at £180 per day, so times 3. Okay, and that's going to be a total of £540. So if I add that together, I'm going to get £4,378.503. Okay, well, it's close enough to call that £4,378.50. Okay, and that would be the answer to this particular question. Hope that's okay for you. You might have slightly different ways of calculating it or laying it out, but essentially you need to make sure you get the semicircle, the straight edge, and then just do the multiplications through. Okay, let's move on then to question number 20. Question number 20, we're being asked to deal with indices. Okay, and basically the first question is simplifying it. Well, Where we've got two indices that are multiplied together, we actually add those. So the answer to the first one would be m to the value of 7. Okay. The second one, part B, is we've got 5np cubed, and that's all cubed. Okay, so you're going to be a little bit careful here, because basically the cubing part of it applies to each of the terms inside the actual brackets. So 5 cubed is the same as saying 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. Okay, and then I've got n cubed, so it's a single value of n, and then I'm going to cube that, so it would be n cubed. Okay, and then I've got p cubed, which is this bit here. Okay, and that's also going to be cubed, so we multiply these two indices together and we get p to the 9. Okay, hope that's all right for you. Let's move on to part C. Okay, with this particular one, really it's just a case of simplifying this through using well, really equivalent fractions to begin with, and then just working through the indices. So 32 over 4. Okay, so if I look at the numbers themselves, well, I know that 4 will go into 32, or divide into 32, 8 times. So actually, I can lose the 4 and lose the 32 and just write 8 at the top there. Okay, so if we look at q to the 9, now remember that this bit here, okay, just a little bit of an aside here, this bit here is called the vinculum. Okay, this bit, this line is the vinculum. Okay, and that's q to the 9 divided by q to the 3. So we subtract those two values and it becomes q to the 6. Okay, and we do exactly the same with the value of r, so it's r to the 4. Now remember at the bottom that's r, but it's the same as saying r to the 1. Okay, so that becomes r to the 3 as an answer, and that would be the answer to this particular question. Okay, let's move on then to question number 21. Please do have a go at each of these questions. Stop the video, have a go at each of these questions, and then compare your solutions. We're about halfway through, I guess, this video. I'm going to try to get to the very end of the paper if I can, and we'll aim for about 20 to 30 minutes or so. Okay, so question number 21, find the lowest common multiple. Well, again, I've seen people do this in various different ways. You could multiply it all out and eventually you would come up with a solution. I tend to prefer to use factor trees. So with a factor tree, what I'm looking for is to write the factors of 40 in such a way that I can identify which are the prime factors. Okay, so if I look at 40, I could write that as equal to 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. So I'm just going to check that. 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, and then 8 times 5 is 40. So that's exactly correct. And I'm going to use the same principle with 56 as well. Now you'll notice that I quite like this whole idea of writing the prime factor on the left-hand side. It makes this kind of pattern which just makes my life a little bit easier to be able to see exactly what's going on with the working out the prime factors. Okay, can you see here that I've done them both exactly the same way? Okay, and it just makes it a little bit easier for me to see. Okay, so we're going to write 56, and I'm going to write it underneath, because then I can use this information to be able to work out the lowest common multiple. But first I need the highest common factor, because I can see that when I've got these written like this, I can write 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, so that would be 2 times 2 times 2. So the highest common factor of these numbers is going to be 8. Okay, now the lowest common multiple is 8, the highest common factor, times what's left, which is 5 and 7. Okay, and if I multiply all of that out, I'm going to get 280, which would be the answer to this question. Okay, so again, you know, you might have a slightly different method. I tend to prefer to do it like that. It might be a little bit long-winded, but it certainly kind of works for me because I can then use exactly the same when I'm working with question or part B of this question. So I've got A, okay, and what it's said here is that A is the equivalent to 2 to the cubed multiplied by 3 multiplied by 5. Well, I'm going to write that out longhand. Okay, and then B is going to be 2 squared times 3 times 5 squared. Okay, now as I'm looking at that, then I can work out the highest common factor, which is what the question is asking me to do. So the highest common factor is going to be these common factors together. Okay, so there's 2's there, and I can see 3's there and 5's there as well. Okay, so the highest common factor is 2 times 2 times 3 times 5. Okay, and if I work that out, I'll get an answer of 60. Okay, and that would be the answer to this question. Again, you might have slightly different ways of doing this, but that sort of works for me. I think it's just quite methodical. If you have a look on the channel, there is also a playlist that looks at highest common factor and lowest common multiple questions, and that will give you some other examples as well. Okay, let's move on then to question number 22. So in question number 22, we've got a line showing on a graph, and we've got to find the equation of the line. Okay, well, with a lot of these questions, really what they're after you to do, what they want you to do, is to put the equation for the line in the form of y equals mx plus c. Now, hopefully you've come across that, okay, in your studies. Well, m really is the gradient, okay, and c is what we call the y-intercept. Okay, now this particular question, C is relatively easy because we can look at this and we can see, well, it actually crosses the y-axis at that point, so I know that the y-intercept is -6. Okay, so that's good. The next thing I need to do is I need to figure out the gradient. Well, the gradient is the difference in y divided by the difference in x, and probably the easiest way to do that is to draw a triangle, okay, like that. Now hopefully you'll be able to see this on the video, but I can see the difference in y is the difference along here, which is actually 6 units, okay, and the difference in x along here is 2 units, okay, so I've got 6 divided by 2, which is a gradient of 3. Okay, all right, hopefully, 6 divided by 2 okay, which is a gradient of 3. Okay, so I can then just write this now as a proper equation for the line L, and that's going to be y equals 3x minus 6, and that would be the answer to this particular question. Okay, let's move on then to question number 23. Question number 23, we've got somebody who's going out to buy a van, okay, and they pay £8,500 plus VAT at 20%. All right, so what I would do with these sorts of questions is usually I tend to sort of stop there, because I think if they've given you that bit of information, then really you're going to need to use it probably elsewhere in the question. So I'm going to stop at that point, and I'm actually going to say, well, in that case, the cost is going to be 8,500 plus 20% VAT. Okay, so in other words, I can multiply that by 1.2. This is 120%, if you like, 100% for the 8,500 and 20% for the VAT. So that's going to give me a total cost of 10,200. Okay, so Rhea pays a deposit for the van. She then pays the rest of the cost in 12 equal payments of that amount. Okay, so let's have a look at the payments. Okay, so the payments are going to be 12 times 531.25, okay, which is going to be 6,375. Okay, so therefore, if she's paid a deposit then it's going to be the difference between the 10,200 and the 6,375, okay? So the deposit payment is going to be the same as one minus the other, so it's 10,200 minus 6,375. Okay, so at long last we've finally got all the information that we're required to answer the question. So what we've worked out is the total cost, okay, we've worked out the payments and we've worked out the deposit. And the question is asking us to find the ratio of the deposit Rhea pays to the total of the 12 equal payments, which is this one here, okay? So at the moment, it's quite big numbers, really. We've got a ratio, okay, and we would write that as deposit to payments. Okay, so deposit is 3825 dot dot and then 6375. Now, what you could do though, once you put this in its simplest form, really if you just actually pop this into a calculator as a fraction, if you write 3825 divided by 6375, then when you simplify it, you're going to get 3 to 5. Okay, and that's the answer to this particular question. You might choose to divide through by 5 or 25 or something like that and chip away at this, and that's absolutely fine to do that, really. It's just trying to get to the simplest form is what you're looking for. Okay, so let's move on then to question number 24, where we're being asked to draw a graph. So the first part of that is being asked to complete the table of values. Okay, well the first thing is that we've been given a couple of values to work also from, so we know that when x is 0, y is minus 6, and that's because if I plug 0 into here, I get 0 squared, which is 0, minus 0, okay, so those two become just nothing, and then I've got minus 6 left, okay? So really we need to do the same with the other numbers as well. Now you could choose to pop these into a calculator. You might just be careful a little bit, because if I look at the value of x when it's minus 2, it would be better to write minus 2 squared minus 2 minus 6, okay? Now the reason that is because you've got to be very careful with these minus signs. A very typical sort of question is it's very easy to kind of make errors. So whenever you see the value of x, just pop it into brackets, and that will make your calculations much easier, because minus 2 squared is the same as saying minus 2 times minus 2, which is 4, okay? And then I've got minus a minus, well that becomes a positive, and then minus 6, okay? So when x equals minus 2, in this particular case, y would equal 0, okay? And then we go through the same process with all the other numbers as well. Now with the positive numbers, you can kind of do these perhaps as just mental arithmetic, but one of the things you need to be aware of is that we're looking at a quadratic graph, so it's going to be a nice curved graph. So let's just work out the values first, and then we'll just plot them and see that it looks okay on the graph paper. Okay, so minus 1, we've got minus 1, and again I'm going to square that in brackets. Minus and minus 1 again, and then minus 6. So minus 1 squared is 1. Minus a minus is a positive, minus 6. So when x equals minus 1, y is going to equal 1 plus 1 is 2, minus 6 is minus 4. Okay? So with the other three numbers, you can probably do these probably as mental arithmetic, but because they're positive, it's not so bad. So I've got 1 squared, which is 1, minus 1, so that's 0, and then minus 6. Okay, so that actually is going to be minus 6 as well. Okay, 2 squared is 4, minus 2 is 2, and then 2 minus 6 is minus 4. Okay, 3 squared is 9, minus 3 is 6, and 6 minus 6 is also 0. So the numbers look a little bit odd, okay, but when we plot them, we're going to get this nice quadratic curve. Okay, so I'm just going to pop these points on, okay, as I'm working through, so you can see this hopefully on the screen. I'll do my best to make sure it fills the screen properly for you. Okay, so let's have a look at the first one. Well, the first one is going to be minus 3, 6, which is going to be all the way up here, okay? And then I've got minus 2, 0, which is here. I've got minus 1, minus 4 is there, okay? I've got 0, minus 6, okay? And then I've got 1 minus 6 is over here. I've got 2 minus 4 is there. And then I've got 3, 0. Okay, now hopefully you can see that this is going to be tricky on the video, but I'll give it my best shot, and probably this won't be a particularly good curve, but hopefully you'll be able to see that what I can do is I can create a nice curve like that. Okay, now just as a point, just be very careful with these points at the bottom, the very bottom here. These don't flatten out, okay? It doesn't join that point to join that point as a straight line. It actually has a curve, and this bit here is actually called the turning point, okay? Hopefully you can see that on the video, okay? So this bit at the bottom is the turning point. So you need to make sure that when you draw your curve, you get that little bit of it, okay? All right, so part C of this question, it says, use your graph to find estimates, the solutions of the equations x squared minus x minus 6 equals. All they mean by that is draw in the value of minus 2 for y. So y equals minus 2, okay, at this point, y equals minus 2, okay? And then read off where it crosses, okay? So in part C of the question, okay, I'm just going to move to the next sheet, but in part C of the question, all I'm going to do is read off these 2 points here, okay. Now on my particular graph, I would get that as x equals minus 1.5, minus 1.5, and x equals 2.6. Okay, and that's an additional 2 marks for that question, so it's quite useful to have. Okay, let's move on then to question number 25. It says a force of 70 newtons acts on an area of 20 centimetres. Okay, force is increased by 10, the area is increased by 10, pressure increases, blah, blah. Okay, so really all we need to do is just put this into the formula, and we've got 2 particular scenarios, okay? So the first one is the pressure as it is, okay? So pressure equals force over area, and they're very helpfully giving you the formula at the top in the call out box there. So we've got a force of 70 newtons and an area of 20, okay? So we've got 70 over 20, which equals 3.5, okay? So that would be a pressure of 3.5 newtons per centimetre square. Okay, let's look what happens in the second case. Okay, so this is, if you like, case number 1, which is this one at the top there. Okay, let's have a look at now what happens in number 2. Okay, so I'm going to use the same formula, pressure equals force over area. Okay, now it says the force is increased by 10 newtons. So rather than being 70, it's going to become 80. Okay, and the area is increased by 10 centimetres squared. So rather than it being 20, it's now going to be 30. Okay, and if I put that in my calculator, I'm going to get 2.6 recurring. Okay, so or 2.666 and carry on. Okay, so Helen says the pressure decreases by less than 20%. Is Helen correct? You must show your working. Okay, so this is one of these formulas that is actually really useful to remember, and it is percentage increase or decrease. So percentage increase or decrease is equal to the difference divided by the original. Okay, if you multiply that by 100, you're going to get your percentage. Okay, so increase or decrease is difference over original. So the difference is going to be from 3.5 to 2.6 recurring, and the original was 3.5. Okay, so if I pop that in a calculator, I'm going to get a percentage decrease of 23.8%. So no, I'm afraid that Helen is incorrect. Okay. Right, there we go, and that would answer that particular question. I hope that's okay for you. It's just a case of really being quite methodical as you work through those sorts of questions. Okay, I'm very conscious of time. We're 25 minutes into the video. We've only got one more question to go, so we might as well have a go at that one question and work it through. Now, this particular question, it is 26 on the paper. It's the last question, so it does take a little bit of time, but basically there's a couple of things going on here. Okay, the first is we're being asked to work out the volume of the prism. Well, volume, okay, equals area times depth. Area times depth. Okay, so the problem we have is that we need to work out the area of this triangle. Okay, now we know this height and we know this slant length, but we don't know the base. And as you know, to work out the area of a triangle, we need a half base times height, or some people will say base times height over 2. Okay, and that's perfectly fine as well. We've got the depth. We know the depth is 18, so we're okay on the depth, but this is our problem. We just don't know this. Or do we? Okay, well, the way to do that is to use Pythagoras. So they've introduced Pythagoras into this particular question. Okay, now I don't particularly feel at this point we should go through the whole of Pythagoras, but there is a playlist on the channel if you want to have a look at that. But to work out the base, I'm going to say it's 8.4 squared minus 7.2 squared, and that's going to be equal to the base squared. Okay, and if I work that out, I'm going to get a base of 4.32666 equals the base. Okay, now that's very, very quick. Okay, but if you do have a look at some of the other videos on the playlist, that'll give you a lot more clarity. We're trying to work out what is essentially a right angle triangle, and we've trying to work out that. We know this and we know this. Okay, so hopefully that's all right for you, that I can now plug this information into our volume formula. Okay, if I do that, I've got volume equals a half, and base is 4.32666 times the height of 7.2 times the depth of 18. Okay, pop all that together and I'm going to get 280.36766. Now the question does ask us for 3 significant figures. Always with these sorts of questions, always go back to it and make sure that you quote the level of accuracy that they're looking for, which in this particular case 3 sig fig would be 280 centimeters cubed. Okay, and that's the answer to this particular question. Okay, I hope this whole playlist has been useful to you. If you're not sure about anything, please do add a comment below and I'll always come back to you. Please do subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be looking at probably the Edexcel higher papers next, and I think we're looking at probably 2017. I'm not quite sure, but there are some other papers and playlists that we need to look at as well. I'll look forward to seeing you inside the next video.